Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala ashrafil anbiya'i wal mursaleen. Wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Allahumma ya Allah, ya Rahman, ya Rahim. We deeply express our heartiest gratitude for your blessing and consent. We are here to attend the monthly talk program. May this program run smoothly and achieve its objective and receive your blessing as well. Allahumma ya Allah, ya Sami'un Alim. We ask you earnestly to enrich us with love, joy, a sense of responsibility, and a spirit of mutual respect, so that we can fulfill our trust and treat our customers with calm, dedication, and sincerity. Ya Fattah, Ya Alim. We pray to you to strengthen the determination, agreement, and understanding between us, so that we can realize the sacred slogan, Sepakat Sabah Hebat. Therefore, make us among the education citizens who always prioritize excellence and a quality work culture at every level. Make us civil servants who always maintain a high level of integrity and avoid all forms of corruptions and misuse of power, and at all times fix weaknesses and implement continuous improvement. Allahumma ya zal jalali wal ikram. We sincerely ask you to spread health and well-being for us, our parents, leaders, families, teachers, and all Malaysians. Link our mutual love to each other, respect the diversity of cultures and backgrounds. Make this gathering of ours a blessed meeting, and the farewell hereafter a farewell preserved from all calamities. Allahumma rabbana zalamna anfusana wa illam taghfir lana wa tarhamna lanakunanna minal khasirin. Rabbana atina fid dunya hasanah wa fil akhirati hasanatan wa qina adzaban nar. Wa sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa barik wa sallim. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alamin. Allahu minna wa minkum.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Dan salam sejahtera, salam keluarga Malaysia, salam Sabah Maju Jaya, salam Sepakat Sabah Hebat. Sabah Education Department, our distinguished speaker, Dr. Gregorio Cyrus R. Elejorde, School Division Superintendent, Department of Education, Dumaguete City, Philippines. Our moderator, Mr. Ken Voon, Excellent Principal St. Patrick Secondary School, Tawau, Sabah, Malaysia. Senior Principal Assistant Directors, Sabah Education Department. Principal Assistant Directors, Sabah Education Department. Head of District Education Officers. To all School Improvement Partners Plus and School Improvement Specialist Coaches. Principals, Education Officers, Teachers, and all online participants. Thank you to Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala for allowing us to share the webinar on developing leadership competencies in educational leaders. I'd like to thank everyone who is participating in webinar monthly talk, which focus on the key to effective instructional leadership. I am extremely proud that the school management sector of the Sabah State Department of Education has taken the initiative to develop leadership competencies among educational leaders with the potential to become excellent leaders. The Aspiring Leaders Program seeks to build the capacity of school leaders. The organization of international webinars is one of the activities that can help to meet those requirements. Education leaders take on a lot of responsibilities for keeping the goals and education agendas on track. When carrying out this responsibility, a variety of issues and challenges arise. A leader must be able to use cutting-edge technology, communicate effectively, be flexible and adaptive, and be a change agent. I sincerely hope that this international webinar will provide a fresh perspective in efforts to strengthen school leadership. Furthermore, I hope that we can use the experience and expertise of foreign instructional leaders to strengthen the capacity of Sabah school leaders. Before I conclude, I'd like to thank everyone who was directly or indirectly involved in making this webinar a success. The success of this webinar is fully depends on teamwork and collaboration of all parties. With Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, I hereby officiate the International Webinar Monthly Talk for Educational Leaders. Wabillahi taufiq wal hidayah. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you very much.
Hi, good afternoon, our honorable speaker, Dr. Gregorio Cyrus, and all our participants in our Sabah State Education Department Monthly Talk YouTube Live. Welcome to our international webinar for education leaders. Thank you all for finding time in today's webinar. My name is Ken Voon, and I'm the Principal of SM St. Patrick Tawau in the state of Sabah. I'm your moderator for today's webinar session. Before we start our session, may I introduce the link for the Q&A form to our participants. If you have any questions, you may post the question or send the question to our speaker by using the Q&A form. I think our IT team already posted the link on the top of the chat box. The question will be selected from the Q&A form and then addressed to our speaker after the presentation at the Q&A session later. Regarding the link to register for the e-certificate and attendance, we will post the link before the end of our webinar today. Without further ado, let's begin our talk now. Before we start, let me say a few words about our speaker, Dr. Gregorio Cyrus. Dr. Gregorio is a school division department superintendent for the education department of Dumaguete City, Philippines. He is also a non-resident professor of management for the doctorate program in Cebu Normal University and an official known for his advocacy in education and management. For your information, he has been helping the students in education and the leaders in management for 25 years. Besides, he had won many awards. One of the latest awards that he won is the Most Inspiring Teacher Award of the Philippines in year 2021, last year. Today, he is going to share with us about the effective ways that will help us in our instructional leadership. The title of Dr. Gregorio's sharing for today's webinar is The Key to Effective Instructional Leadership. Let's welcome Dr. Gregorio for his sharing on this virtual stage. Dr. Gregorio, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. And I'm very happy for having received this invitation from the State Education Department of Sabah. Actually, this is one of our collaboration being part of Southeast Asian countries. And I'm happy that the State Department of Sabah is also taking very serious initiatives to building institutional leaders and institutional capacity to improve the schools, particularly in the place that you are right now. I am happy and hope to share with you some of the practices that we have, particularly related to instructional leadership. But the key to instructional leadership could be quite challenging and too broad. That's why I tried to funnel it down to one of the most organic functions of school leaders, which is practically in the area of instructional supervision. So let me share to you some of these items, particularly related in or for instructional supervision for a while. Uh, okay, so instructional supervision is common among school leaders, not only in your country, not only in your state, but all across the globe, especially. And it is the role of school leaders to particularly create an environment that is most suitable to both teaching and learning situations. In fact, the school leaders in every school may appear differently across different countries in terms of name, but the tasks and functions is directly connected to both teaching and learning. And it is our responsibility to improve the environment where both teaching and learning operates. And there are many ways to actually do it in the area of instructional supervision. And the role of our leaders in the schools is particularly to provide assistance, guidance, direction, or even stimulation and any other form of developmental activities that is suitable to the context, to the culture of the school where you are particularly aligned. There are many ways actually to provide guidance and direction to teachers in the schools, and it changes very often. In fact, in the last 2 years, we have been tested in both our creativity as well as innovations to provide instructions even on a very remote system or remote method. In this area of providing guidance as well as direction to teachers, our school leaders have provided various diverse activities related to improving skills in the area of teaching as well as improving the situation at the classroom level. Among school leaders and among common activities that we normally do is to actually provide mentoring to our teachers and as well as to anybody who wish to particularly provide improvement for our classroom practices. Mentoring and coaching, although Both can be differentiated on the way we present them. There are different models of both modeling. There are also models in the area of coaching that we could utilize, but I am particularly oriented on using the models that is best suitable to the context of our teachers. Both mentoring and coaching can be taken from an individual's perspective. So it's important for leaders to actually profile their own teachers before the provision of such activity. There are also other areas in both the provision of guidance and direction where we could possibly help our teachers improve their level of instruction. Some leaders do provide some kind of clinical supervision. We call it clinical in the sense that the school leaders will provide sometimes corrective measures to how instruction is being facilitated or done at the classroom level. So we have there the terms like clinical supervision or clinical observations that is sometimes periodically or frequently being initiated by leaders at the classroom level. But other than observations, supervisions, leaders at the school level could also come up with certain policy contextualization that supports the distinct need of leaders in the schools within the parameters of the general directions or policies stated and issued by our state department. So actually, these are just some few of the items that we could possibly do in the area of guidance and direction to provide, particularly our new teachers, to help them build capacity, and such capacity would be converted into actual learning outputs of the students. In the same manner, in instructional supervision, we also provide stimulations. Stimulation sometimes would mean motivation to our teachers. And sometimes school leaders provide motivations through provision of material resources that is needed by our teachers at the classroom level. In fact, equipment, other forms of material resources are done, even benefits are actually stimulants needed by our teachers to pursue excellence and to pursue established practice in the area of instruction. But then stimulation could also come in different ways, like, let's say, for example, provision of clear goals to everybody. In the institution, it is important to establish clear direction. And if direction is quite understandable at the level of our teachers, the ownership of such would be taken very individually by our teachers, and so therefore collective and collaborative methods would be made to push for the achievement of the objectives or the goals of the department. Earlier, I noted that other than guidance, directions, and stimulations, there are also other developmental activities that we could do in the area of instructional supervision. For example, your activity today, in fact, I appreciated it. You're trying to maximize the use of technology to create some kind of a knowledge forum, information forum among aspiring leaders in the state of Sabah. So that's why this is the developmental, one of the developmental activities that I would like to emphasize. Our teachers need to grow regularly, and teaching for them is a regular journey towards achieving. And by journey, I mean to say that our teachers need to grow from time to time, and provision of activities like this is actually helpful for our teachers to build capacity. So other than this forum, small group is also being recommended, like creating quality circle forum. It is where a group of teachers, few groups of teachers would share their best practices at the classroom level. And from sharing their practices, they would also learn and to adapt and benchmark theoretically what has been effective in other areas or in other classrooms. And by doing so, we're trying to come up with an informal setup where our teachers would learn informally through the practices of other educators in the school. We have also other practices in other countries, like, for example, the use of lesson studies. You see, they do research together. We learn from the findings and we share it, though this is similar to what Quality Circle Forum is. And then in the Philippines, we are adapting also the so-called learning action cells. There are different grade levels, and there are a group of teachers every grade levels or every specialization or every subject. And then they would share practices in this area across different areas of instructions. And then how it is done would be subject to, of course, the context of the school. Like, how would the sharing be done? Would it be on a peer, small group, a group of three, etc., where learning would become possible? These are just some few of the many things that we could explore as school leaders to improve the situations, the learning, teaching situations at the school level, and improving it beyond what is now and the current status of our classroom or of our schools. However, instructional supervision can only be possibly a list of activities. Now, what I was mentioning to you earlier are simply list of activities for you to choose from. But when we talk about effectiveness, it is actually achieving a certain desired result. And earlier today, your director has been emphasizing that everybody, all schools, not only the school leaders, but including our teachers and other stakeholders who supported our schools, must achieve a certain level of success. Now, there are different measures of success before we could possibly call it effective. But the question would be, how would it become effective, and how would we convert the current reality into something that is desired to us by individually or desired by the organization? I understand the effort that has been poured, the effort that has been pulled by our education leaders in the state to build institutional capacity by providing forum like this. The choice of the school heads are actually very critical in terms of suitability. The choices are there, but the judgment as to what particular method to use so that such method would be suitable to the context of our schools or to the context of every individual teachers would make the current reality turn into a desired reality. Only then that we could possibly conclude that there is effectiveness in the level of practice. Earlier today, it was just simply an enumeration of practices. So now I would like to give you some few steps that I have tried myself because I was into the practice of education for actually 27 years. And there are realizations that I also have made or insights that I have came across um, in the area of practice. One is that when we wanted a practice to become effective at the level of school governance, effectiveness must be done only through a consistent practice, meaning to say, effectiveness is a product of consistency. In fact, there is a familiar phrase that is related to this. It says, excellence is a product of consistency. If we wanted results to become excellent, then our school leaders and our teachers in the schools must practice consistency, because anything that is not consistent would not actually result into something that is desirable. And how do we develop consistency? In fact, the very title of this program is The Key to Effective Leadership. But effectiveness of leadership could only be realized if there is consistent practice of the many things under the umbrella of leadership. And there could be a lot of things that we need to do in the school so that we could become consistent, we could become effective. So in here, I would like to introduce to you the first letter in the title of this forum, that is the key principle. Now, what is a key principle? The key principle starts with the so-called know your why. When we wanted to become effective and we wanted to become consistent at the things we do, or I repeat, if we wanted to become consistent of the things that we do, it is important for us to identify, to know, and to be aware of the why. What do you mean by knowing your why? It is related to what has been previously stated earlier, like setting up the goal. Why is it for us important to act on this particular practice? Why is it important for us to perform such action? Why is it important for us to perform the stated practices in instructional supervision? Like, say, for example, mentoring. Why is this a need, or why is there a need to conduct mentoring? Why is there a need to perform clinical observation or clinical instruction? Why do we coach? If we bear that in mind and commit ourselves to our goal, then that in itself is one of the major secrets to achieving things. So that's why, in many cases, in many organizations, we wanted our leaders, or we from time to time check from our teachers if we are still in the right direction. We check whether they knew our vision, we check whether we knew or they knew our direction, and in fact ask them to memorize sometime what is it that we wanted to achieve as an organization. Because by collectively sharing the reason for such action, then our people within the school would develop ownership and collaborative spirit towards achieving a desired end, a desired goal for the organization. So that is the reason why we need to find out the why in the things that we do. Second is the word employing a system. By employing a system, after knowing the reason why we perform such action, we look forward to what is it that we will do to accomplish our action. So these are now the procedures, the processes that we need to perform in order to achieve a particular results. And such actions are things that we do not do only once or twice. That's why earlier we emphasized the so-called principle of consistency. And by consistency, we say there must be a repetition. There must be repetitive practice until the action would become an established practice among school leaders. When you set that pattern for teachers, eventually it becomes and it forms part of the habit of every individual, even for school leaders, in fact. So the actions that we do is something that we need to, of course, situate and be established within the context of our people. And once you have identified what these desired practices are, we develop them into a system, we develop them into a mechanism, And such mechanism will be implemented frequently or an irregular or in a regular basis, so that such action would lead towards development of consistency before a particular action would yield the reward. Actually, the key contains the entirety of the things, but then it is something that we need to develop as a habit. It's very important. No? It's not just simply identifying what actions to choose, what actions and practice to choose from. It may be one of the options that were stated earlier. However, there must be an element of consistency before we particularly yield a reward. In many state departments across the globe, we look at rewards or effectiveness in many different ways. We consider and we treat it effective by looking at examination results, for example. If it is valuable to us and to our organization, we make use of results of examinations as benchmark for our effectiveness. But if you go beyond the output, there is the outcome, there is the impact. You could use different parameters, measurable parameters, and consider it as a way that contributes to effectiveness. Other parameters that may sometimes be considered are sometimes the number of your learners that have successfully went to higher education institutions. Others would consider the number of graduates we have that are now employed in many industries in the place where we are located. Effectiveness or reward may also mean the level of literacy in the place. So, whatever is valuable in the organization, we could actually make it as a parameter of the rewards that we wanted. And for as long as these parameters are measurable in nature. So there the SMART principle. No? It's measurable, achievable, and then if it has been there, it has been achieved, then the rewards become a byproduct of your awareness of the why and a byproduct of your so-called consistent practice of the actions that you do in relationship. So as a whole, I just simply call it the key principle in establishing and developing consistency in the many practices for school leaders. And for this to become more consistent, I would like to bring you into this picture, no? A keystone. We call it a keystone. The one at the center, which is colored red in the arch, is actually a keystone. You know what? The role of the keystone is actually to develop and to hold together the elements of the arch, both in the left and in the right. If you remove the keystone, the possibility of these other elements falling down is highly probable in this area. So that means the role of the keystone is to hold together the other elements. Now, if we situate it in the school level, the keystone would become a fundamental tenet, a fundamental source that is possibly holding together our actions. And if we develop such keystone habits, then the possibility of a school achieving its target, the targets that we were mentioning earlier or more, can become highly possible because the keystone has been established and has been embedded in the habits of our school leaders in the state of Sabah. This is an example of a keystone. So just imagine if you remove that stone at the very top. So what would possibly happen to the starch? So this is just an illustration of the role of the keystone in holding together all other elements in the art. So um, intangibly, meaning if we convert it into some intangible principles in our school leaders role is to actually promote that keystones. But before we move forward, let me first emphasize some of the key principles in the development of these keystones, or in the development of the habits, keystones for habits. First, the first principle there is habits are actions that we repeatedly do, or do repeatedly and unconsciously. Meaning, these are some just reflexes, things that requires repetition. Habits are are things that we normally do even without us consciously giving attention to, but we do things like that. Meaning to say, we don't have to think about it. It simply become a practice that immediately comes out if given a particular cue or trigger. In the school, there are plenty of habits that we do, for teachers as well as for leaders. For example, what subjects do we normally go and visit for observations? Some of us may not be very conscious to just simply visit subjects, but if we try to consolidate and quantify the number of observations that we do, we might notice that some of the subjects are more as compared to other subjects. Of course, there are also other reasons, but one of those reasons could also be habits, meaning to say, these are things that we do unconsciously on the process. When we communicate with people, when we interact with our external partners, and when we interact with our internal partners, habits are actually forming part and govern some of our actions and our decisions. And take note, 80 or 20 to 80% of all our actions are actually governed by habit. So you just imagine how things are if these actions that we do are governed, although not all actions are actually governed by habits, but then there could be plenty of the things that we decide, act related to school supervision and instructional leadership that might be connected, closely connected, directly or indirectly by the habits that we have as school leaders. We just imagine if we develop our habits consciously, and the kind of habits that we do that are supportive to improving instruction and learning at the school level. You just imagine how feasible it is and how powerful it could be if such habit could be utilized to improve the environment in both teaching and learning. You see? So habits are most of the times, these are actually studies that are presented, 50 to 80% of our actions are governed by habits. So I suppose many of us are now trying to reflect if what are the some of the actions that we do in the schools that were initiated and regulated by our usual habits. We're now trying to it's important and it's critical, possibly, and significant to determine what possibly are these habits, because part of the actions that we may possibly do when we go back to our respective stations would be to come up with certain assessment whether the habits that we acquire are something that is useful or not to the areas where we are assigned and to the areas where we are expected to perform. Earlier today, we emphasized, in fact, even in the prayer that we develop, the kind of accountability and responsibility, things like this. And And as an individual person, we can be accountable to our actions by also trying to look at our habits and whether or not our habits are things that would contribute to improving our tasks, improving our schools and the organizations by which we help build and we help sustain. So that's a second of the items that we do that I would like to share with you as well. In fact, even in my case, and even in the institutions that we do sometimes self introspection and finding out what are these habits that we could possibly regulate, and if habits are embedded, institutionalized into the actions or into our actions, things like this would just simply come out without having to exert so much effort. You see, it's just like when we produce effective results, habits lead to consistency. Uh, but in habits, we don't have to exert much effort. So possibly in building the habits, the efforts would be contained in that portion. But once it is imbibed, once it is acquired, it would simply become a reflex action from the management or leaders whenever a particular cue or trigger presents itself. Looking into the many things that are governed by our habits, the actions that we do resulting from the inducement of our habits, in here we see that habits would in one way or another impact certain areas of our life. Normally sometimes see, we become what we do, we become what we repeatedly do. In fact, when we are in the schools, there are certain patterns which we do that actually is, leaders are trying to create certain trademarks. Trademarks are actions or things that leaders normally perform, and has created a pattern. And so it has become an artifact of leaders. Wherever you are, you will become known for it. It has become your legacy. And, and things that you do are contributory to your other areas or to other areas of your life and myself as well. Uh, so, so when we do have good habits, the results of which may possibly be beneficial to many of our work, like creating a habit of classroom observations, creating a habit of providing guidance, creating a habit of um, engaging very professionally with our teachers in the area where they need help to improve instruction as well as preparation. In fact, even when we look at curriculum, there are so many things to look at. No, there are plenty of phases in the curriculum. We look at the written part, the plan type, the part where you do the written curriculum. There is also the area on instructional or taught delivery. There is the area of assessment, and even in the phase or area of material preparations. And each of these areas of curriculum requires plenty of things to do. And if we develop certain habits to take care of these areas that comprises what truly learning and instruction is, then the possible result that is within the proximity of our target will become highly probable in the practice. And these are concerns that our leaders need to actually look into, especially in that area at the school level. So hopefully the habits that we have are things that are moving towards improving our goals in education. And there are innumerable actions that we need actually to do or perform at the school level to create the impact that we so desire and as an organization. When we become leaders, all of us actually started with good intention. We have so much good intention. I do not know the procedure or the process, how leaders turned out to be leaders in your place. But in our case, our leaders or school leaders normally started as school teachers, and then they do apply for a position if they have some kind of a potential to become leaders, and their experience in the area of curriculum and instructions could actually benefit in many ways to look into in improving both instruction and learning, teaching and learning in every classroom. But nevertheless, all leaders actually start, successful or unsuccessful, we all start with good intention. However, the results of such intention may be different, could be different in many ways. There are leaders who make good choices, and there are also school leaders who make bad choices. And those who make good choices become successful, especially if there an element of consistency in the things that we do. For unsuccessful leaders, normally we make bad choices. Unfortunately, we make a lot of bad choices that make us unsuccessful leader. Now, the question would be how to make a good choice for our organization. And there could be plenty of answers to such question. It requires us to evaluate our own context. It requires us to profile the members of our organization so that the best form of approach could be taken. It would also requires us to choose the best approach to deal with a particular developmental opportunity. For example, if we have a teacher that needs help in the area of um, questioning, for example, what type of approach do we use to improve categorically his ability to ask questions so that when she improves her question, it would also titillate or provoke critical thinking skills among our learners. You see, the output that we expect our learners to produce are dependent as well on the skills or competence that our teachers would have. Therefore, building the competence of our teachers on a regular basis is fundamental job of school leaders. But there could be many ways to do it. Sometimes leaders make good choices, but the frequency by which these choices are being taken may not be enough to sustain good results. Sometimes we do and act and decide once or twice, perform the job twice, thrice, but it's not enough to create a behavior change on the part of the teacher. So therefore, the result would not still be as the one that we desired for the organization. So it may not be about being good or bad. Sometimes it may become a question of consistency. And I'm seeing such because I have also school leaders under my supervision. I've been into three different divisions, big, medium, and small divisions, with hundreds as well as thousands of school leaders. But one thing is common: there are successful leaders who manifested uh, some kind of consistency of habits, consistency of practice, and they become successful school leaders. There are those who failed to develop habits and who failed to develop consistency. And so the result is not as acceptable as expected of a particular organization. So in this case, we all start with good intentions, but results could be highly diverse depending on the choices that we make and depending on the frequency of the practices that we introduce at the school level. And earlier today, we mentioned so many of these practices depending on the need of your school, depending on the context of your teachers. Actually, there could be plenty of things. It's not only about teachers, but in the area of instructional supervision, it is fundamental to look at competence of our teachers and help assist them improve their level of quality. There could be different maturity levels of teachers. There are teachers who are self-directed. There are teachers who actually need supervision from A to Z. There are those that you see, these are things that you would make judgment to because the frequency of your attention would depend largely on this level of maturity. And when we do profiling of our teachers, we would see whether or not the frequency of our practice in introducing successful approaches of instructional supervision would work or not. Sometimes the choice of a particular approach is not suitable to a particular level, so therefore the approach may not work. So this requires a lot of analysis and profiling and selection of a particular practice at the school. So you see, the job of school leaders are very challenging, but however, your state never stops there with that realization, but continue to look forward to and look for ways to improve competence of your teachers and of our school leaders. So you will make the choice from among habits. So which of these habits will you retain and which of the habits will you start creating to? In this case, for example, which habits will I develop so that I would become more consistent in the school? Many of you are considered possibly at your level as excellent school leaders. And if we try profile you up, one item that may possibly be common among successful leaders is that attitude of consistency. Now, the choice is yours. The choice is yours. So, how would you be able to build up the habits that you need in order to become a successful, school leader? Um, and what would it take to develop such habit? And that is a lot of question to take to. In fact, when we go back and come up with certain reflection, developing a habit can be quite tough as it requires sometimes policy actions. Sometimes it requires from the top management certain policy contextualization. The policies that we create could recreate the environment that we operate that may become suitable for the creation of the habits that we need to in order to meet expectations, in order to meet the desired actions or the desired results that we wanted for all the schools in the state of Sabah. So things like this. In here is a particular cycle that I would like to present to you. In developing the habit, it is important to look for a cue. Earlier today, I mentioned the word trigger, cue. Developing a habit requires this cycle. We look for a cue, like say, for example, when I am hungry, what action is taken? It's a habit. When I am hungry, hunger is a cue. When you are hungry, you would institute some kind of an action. So what do we do when we are hungry? We eat. The reward is we get filled, we get satisfied gastronomically, things like that. And then if we try translate it into basic principles in education, what is it that you wanted to create a habit and what cue would push you to start coming up with actions? When you see a teacher, what item to look at? what guidance or forms or approaches would you choose, and what level of rewards would you receive or yield after a particular actions, and how often would you do that so that rewards could be achieved. So it's the same thing, go back to queue and then perform the routine is practically comprised of the actions that we do, and then and then we yield rewards thereafter. Now, in the management principle, there is the so-called input, the process, and the output. But there is no way for us to actually control results except about controlling both inputs as well as process. So what are the inputs and what are the process? We could do something better in this area. Generally, it would result into a better and a more effective result for our teachers. Okay. So in here, I would like to go back to the main principle that I would like earlier emphasized about consistency. We talk about excellence being a product of consistency. Now we also talk about success, because there may be a lot of ways to measure success, but then things like that can only become a reality if we emphasize the area of consistency. And to me personally, consistency is forming a habit of practice, an established practice that are contributory to improving results at the school level. So I hope that this 45-minute talk to 1 hour is giving you certain tips that would, in a way, guide you in carrying out your basic tasks and functions when you go back to your respective schools. Thank you very much. And then, hello, Mr. Lee. There are questions that I am reading here. So can I proceed immediately, or you will first?
Okay, I will
Okay.
uh,
Thank you.
mention
Thank you.
about questions. Yeah. Okay. Hmm. Okay. Thank you, Dr. Gregorio, for the insightful sharing. It is such an interesting and knowledgeable sharing for us. And I'm sure we are able to gain and learn the meaningful knowledge on how to lead the school effectively with the keyword consistency in our leadership, as what mentioned by our doctor. And I think now it is time for our Q&A session. So it is time for your questions. And I was informed that we have many questions from our participants. However, we can only select 2 questions. So may I request our IT team to post the selected questions on the screen to our speaker. So the first question is, how can instructional leadership be applied effectively? The second question, the first question is, how can instructional leadership be applied effectively? Okay, the second question that I received is, how to measure the effectiveness of an instructional leadership. How do we measure the effectiveness of our instructional leadership? So I think both of the questions are related to the instructional leadership. So we would like to invite Doctor to answer the questions.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. How can instructional leadership be applied effectively? Actually, there is no white and black answer for it. Actually, instructional leadership is actually a very huge term for school leaders. Very school. Instructional leadership may come in terms of resource management may also come uh, in a form of human resource management as well. And there is the instruction and curriculum aspect as well. So there could be many spectrums to look into such. The best form or the best possible answer that I could share with you in this area is a leader is expected to normally look into the context of your organization. And by context of the organizations, you look at where the developmental opportunities are. Developmental opportunities means the inadequacy or the items or the elements in the organization that has become a barrier to meeting your goal. If you could effectively and proficiently profile those aspects that has become a barrier to achieving your goal, then any area in instructional leadership could become a suitable approach to such. There are many approaches to instructional leadership. For example, situational. There are also the directive type of leadership, or there are those also that requires collaborative leadership, but none of this could be applied without looking into the profile of your organization. So the first question is, how would teachers best learn in your context? If they are the kind of teachers who could work best through collaboration, so possibly collaboration would be our best approach to them. But if you are in a group of teachers that requires guidance from A to Z, meaning non-self-directed teachers, collaboration may not be the best approach to it. You may possibly introduce something that would engage to them, and probably giving them directions, turn directions, and guide them from letter A to Z to make them quite effective teachers in your field. So, depending on the context, depending on the profiling of your organization, you could choose from among the many approaches that you do. In fact, even the activities that I was telling you earlier, like the use of clinical supervision, may not work for everybody. Because for self-directed teachers who are really very good and very competent in the field, you don't have to focus on clinical supervision because they're expected to have developed maturity in instruction. But then there might be other areas that you could look into and explore. And that is how we will truly utilize instructional leadership. So I repeat, no such thing as one model that works best for. That is an item that you will have to judge for yourself. What we could do best is to provide you a litany of approaches. Choose which approach could be best suitable in that context. For the second question, how do we measure effectiveness? So normally in the school, we look at results. If the result is not tantamount to the effort that you do, then possibility is that the alignment between our instructional leadership to that of the result is quite consistent. So if in the school you perform better across different measurements, measurements, for example, because you mentioned here measurement, it must be something that is measurable. Okay, so how do we measure, and what parameters do we use, or objectively verifiable indicators to introduce so that we could measure effectiveness of instructional leadership? So we could look at results, and the results that we expect could be our learners results. If there is a way for you to measure institutional academic achievement, I suppose there are. The state is undertaking such assessment for all of your students. That could be a measure, but it may not be the only one. It may not be the only one. The achievement or the results that our students would have would also speak of the kind of capacity that our teachers have. And that capacity of teachers is also, in a way, dependent on the kind of guidance and instructional leadership that our school heads are trying to deliver. So, if instructional leadership is effective in these areas, for say, instruction, then the result might be better. But if the result is not good, then something might have been missed in the process. So, what is that part of the process that you need to improve? You need to get and explore into to improve. And when we talk about instructions, there could be plenty of things to look at. You see the objectives part, you see the methods used by the teachers, you also see how they are being assessed, you also look at the materials that they are using, why the students are achieving or not in that particular level. And then if we apply consistency in that area, then possibility is that in the overall goal and the overall assessment that is being administered by the state, then your students would definitely, in a way, meet those particular achievement. So things like effectiveness can be measured in many ways depending on the parameters of the institution. But I would like to emphasize that instructional leadership is not just about instructional supervision. There are many areas in instructional leadership. If we go into specifics of instructional leadership, there the area of management, there the area of human resource, there is the area of resources, and how these things are working together to promote a better situation, teaching learning situation, are actually things that we do at the level of the school. And there are different tools to measure. In fact, research could be one of the many ways that we could use. You see, even if it is perceptions, we also triangulate data just to find out whether there is a connection of the results to that of the practices of your teachers. Only then that we could see whether there is effectiveness in carrying out instructional leadership of the school heads.
Thank you, Dr. Gregorio, for your answer. I think that is the additional input on how to raise up our quality of leadership in our school as a school leader in the school. Okay, now I think we can now move forward to the next session. So before we end our webinar for today, we would like to invite Dr. Gregorio to make an conclusion.
Again.
Yeah, to make a conclusion about our
Ah,
webinar today.
our journey for school leadership will never end for as long as we are in the school.
Mm.
From time to time, we might be changing course. From time to time, we might be changing assignments, but the direction would continue to be the same for many of us. If we wanted this direction to be achieved, I would like you all enjoy the journey. But the journey can be a little tough. But if we enjoy that journey of creating consistency and creating a habit, something that would contribute to our goal, then that would be the best form thing leaders could do so that they would be able to enjoy and to be happy in their journey towards meeting their goal in the organization.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Gregorio, for the sharing. So before we end our webinar for today, I would like to make a small announcement on how to get the digital or e-certificate of participation for our participants. So please click the link that has been shared on the top of the chat box. Do remember that the Google form will be open until tonight before 12 a.m. So all the participants are invited to fill in and complete your details, especially your email address. Please make sure that your email address is correct so that you can receive your e-certificate. Now, we come to the end of our session of our Monday Talk International webinar organized by Sabah State Education Department. On behalf of the Education Department of Sabah of Malaysia, we would like to extend our sincere appreciation and many thanks to our Sabah Education Director, Datuk Tania, our Deputy Director of School Management Sector, Mr. Abidin Marjan, and all the Education Department officers, our IT team members, and not forgetting all our organizing committee members to make our webinar today possible. We also would like to give special thanks to our honorable speaker, Dr. Gregorio Cyrus Pamphletings, for his wonderful speech. Lastly, thank you for over 200 participants who joined our webinar today. That is the end of our webinar. Thank you very much. Have a good evening. Goodbye.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. I will be leaving now.